Yotsuba! No, I'm not mad, but it's fine. It's fine. It's the first girl every single time. It's always the first girl you meet. Subaru sticks with Emilia because she's the first girl he meets. It happens again in Clanad, Orimo. I mean, shoot, even in real life, we still have Sakura fans because they met her first despite Sakura being completely useless. Why is it always the first girl? Now, the reason why I started this expedition was because I just finished reading. Yes, I said reading. If you are a true anime connoisseur, you will do some degree of reading. But I finished Go-toubun no Hanayome, or quintessential quintuplets for those of you in the West. And as much as I like Yotsuba as a character, a small part of me died when Miku lost despite trying her very hardest. And hey, at least the series actually adds some closure to the competition, unlike so many others, where they just leave it open-ended for the viewers so that they can milk as much cash as they want or keep the audience engaged in the series. So, good job Neji Haruba. Good on you. But despite my acceptance of this, I just cannot help but wonder, why is it always the first girl who you meet ends up getting the win? The first reason is pretty obvious, and that is that we get to spend a lot more screen time with the character. We develop an attachment to them first, and as such, more people root for them because they are the first. But it's also familiarity at work too. You know how when you go to a new school or it's your first day at the job and you know no one else there, but then this person comes, talks with you, and suddenly, 12 years later, they're your best friend and you're having drinks every night and talking about how useless Sakura is. It's kind of the same thing here. We, the viewers, as humans, despite being the degenerate weeb scum that we are, we have a need to be in a group of some form. And so the first person you meet tends to have that effect, creating relationships to that character. More so since they are in a world we are just entering. Familiarity is a powerful tool, and this ends up aiding in the field of the childhood friend trope. They knew them longer, they have been with them for so many years, so they know how the character thinks, how they act, likes and dislikes, but most of all, have developed feelings for that main character. It's also for this reason that the childhood friend is sometimes dropped later in the series if they weren't dropped in earlier on, and that's because the relationship has already been established.
But what if they're all dropped in and introduced at the same time? Or they have that childhood, or they all have that childhood friendship, or in that series you watch, they're all quintuplets. Or
First of all, this is a video about the first girl. But in the case of quintuplets, or in the case that they all have the childhood connection, normally it comes down to who met the character first, which in itself is its own mystery, and it results in people staying around trying to figure out who that character is. But normally, the first girl will be the one to last confess, or will be unsure of herself or her feelings, resulting in being the last one to realize them. And if the author doesn't do any of that, it's probably because the author's just writing as they go along, trying to stretch out the romantic tension, but it would always end up being the uncertain girl that will end up winning. And technically, they will also end up being the first girl in most scenarios. But this is not true 100% of the time. A good example of a non-first girl being the winner is Taiga from Toradora. But Toradora is an interesting case, as it is a complete inversion of the classic love story, as the romantic interest completely shifts and relies far more on the bonding aspect of a relationship rather than the first girl system, which, while similar, is a far better use of familiarity because it shows that you don't need to be the first girl to get the guy. You just need to get to know him and to have him get to know you, despite how dense and hard-headed he may be. This is something I can personally attest to, as it's always the oblivious dense main character who never notices the girl who is actually interested in him and doing things to spend time with him despite not really liking what they're doing together. Babe, I'm so sorry. But in truth, the first girl system is what is most used simply because it's the easiest to use for telling a story. People want that familiarity and need to know the characters, which is why the times that you see the first girl system being broken is from already established stories that people already know more about. But this doesn't mean that the first girl system is bad, but like all things, it just needs innovation and new ways to create those moments of suspension and romantic competition. Like what Go-toubun has, where the tension for the viewer came from not knowing which sister was the one who first met Usaguri-san, thus putting them all on equal footing. Or by having the true love interest only come about after the removal of another thought to be true love interest, and it turns out that this character is far more suited to be the romantic partner, but then the original writer comes back and complains and forces his version of the story by ruining all the build-up plot points and the relationships, all in order to bring in a half-baked shell of an ending, and then only to get memed on in the sequel series called Ero Manga Sensei, where you see the second love interest with a full family, and then that sparks a comedic gag in a completely separate series, which pokes fun at how dumb it is of the refusal of the second love interest, and that's actually another story I should put for another day. But while the first girl system will undoubtedly be used for years to come, we should savor the ones who take advantage of this system and use it in interesting ways, ones that we would never see, and advance the cliche into a tool that can be proudly used. Now, if you can excuse me, my fragile little shoujo loving girly heart is aching in pain and I would like to cry. So if you like this type of content, like, subscribe, and I'll make sure to make more of these videos after I recompose my feminine emotions of love. Until next time.
ミクちゃん、毎度に毎度才の子女の子毎度なぜだなぜどうして僕のシュルかな